Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined today by a very special guest, an organic farmer, an SNP councillor, the Deputy Group Leader of Borders Council and the Guinness Book of World Records record holder for the shortest ever serving MEP from the SNP, Heather Anderson. Heather, how are you this evening?
I'm very well, been very busy running it. We've got an organic farm shop here. We've been doing home deliveries, so I've been rushing about doing that as well as calving and being a local councillor and trying to kick up a bit of a stir about this internal market issue.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people will have seen you on social media doing just that. Honestly, I'm surprised you have the time in amongst all this. Perhaps just as well that right now you're not having to run back and forth to Brussels. But we are here to talk about the internal market, and we will get into that very shortly. But first, we have a rundown of today's headlines, and we start, as we always do, with our coronavirus statistics update. So as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 359,537 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 340,910 were confirmed negative and 18,627 were positive. There are 30 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland today. But there are, again, 0 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today, which is the 15th consecutive day with no new reported deaths. Of course, this will be an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will necessarily display symptoms and not everybody will necessarily get themselves tested. Once again, we do urge you, if you are showing any symptoms at all, please do book a test as soon as you can. Of the people who have tested positive in Scotland, there were 255 people in hospital last night, 4 of whom were in intensive care. And the number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the COVID-19 infection remains at 2,491. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. And the latest UK daily figures available show 46,119 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 120. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And before we do get on to the rest of the headlines, I would remind you, if you want to join the conversation here on Broadcasting Scotland, you can do so. If you follow us on Twitter at BroadcastScot and use the hashtag Scotland@7, that's hashtag Scotland7, we will be flashing some of those tweets up on the screen in front of me, as you can see right now. But on to the headlines, and First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has advised people in Scotland not to travel to areas in northern England experiencing a spike in COVID-19 cases. The warning comes after English authorities last night suddenly imposed stricter lockdown conditions on Greater Manchester, East Lancashire and parts of West Yorkshire, and effectively paused the lifting of lockdown elsewhere in England. The Scottish Government announced today that an app is in development to complement the Scottish Health Service's existing Test and Protect contact tracing system. The app will use the same software as that currently in use in Ireland, which has been adapted to work in the north of the island too. The Scottish app will be able to work with these apps to maximise tracing across the common travel area. Use of the app will be voluntary and personal data will not be requested at any stage. Following an announcement by the SNP's National Executive Committee regarding a change of rules around dual mandates, Joanna Cherry, the current MP for Edinburgh South West, has announced that she will not be standing for selection as the Scottish parliamentary candidate for Edinburgh Central. The seat is currently held by Ruth Davidson, who is standing down at next year's election. The Cross-Party Economic Affairs Committee of the House of Lords has published a report entitled Universal Credit Isn't Working, which is scathing about the weaknesses in the new social security regime. The report warns of shrinking public support for the scheme due to multiple design flaws, inadequate levels of support, and lack of specialised support for claimants. It makes a number of recommendations, including making the COVID-19 bonus of £20 per week permanent and reducing the rate universal credit is reduced relative to earnings to enable people to feel a greater benefit from finding work. Douglas Ross, the Tory MP for Moray, has been installed as the frontrunner to replace Jackson Carlaw as leader of the Scottish branch of the Conservative Party. He has said he will remain as an MP until the next UK general election, but would seek to enter the Scottish Parliament at next year's election. Carlaw resigned unexpectedly yesterday. Tory MSP Michelle Ballantyne said he had been pushed by Westminster and that a new leader should not be foisted upon the party in Scotland. Ross has already received the endorsement of former leader Ruth Davidson, who was today confirmed in the honours list marking 1 year in office for Boris Johnson. He has previously been sharply criticised by Amnesty International after saying his first action if he were to become Prime Minister would be to crack down on gypsies and travellers. A West Yorkshire Tory MP has come under fire after blaming the Muslim community for a rise in COVID-19 cases. Craig Whittaker, the MP for Calder Valley, told LBC Radio that in the vast majority of cases, it is the BME communities that are not taking this seriously. He said that a big part of the problem was high multiple occupancy dwellings, including homes with multiple families. Eleanor Rofe, Director of Public Health for Trafford in Greater Manchester, one of the areas put under new stricter measures last night, said the claim was not true and that more than half the cases in her area occurred in young people in the most affluent areas and that there was no particular concentration of cases in poorer areas. Carrie Lam, Hong Kong's chief executive, has postponed elections to the city's Legislative Council from September 6th of this year to September 5th next year, citing a spike in COVID-19 cases as justification. Pro-democracy campaigners had been organising intensively around the election, which is the only expression of democracy allowed in the city by the Chinese government. Many do not believe the coronavirus explanation stands up to scrutiny, and the real motive is to prevent them gaining power. 12 pro-democracy candidates have also been barred from standing for election, including some of the younger protesters, as well as members of the more moderate Civic Party. And finally, the United Kingdom and the European Union have agreed to continue discussing a free trade deal until October the 2nd, Chief Negotiator David Frost said today. Negotiating rounds will take place in August and in September, unless agreed otherwise between the parties, according to a document Frost posted on Twitter. Round 7 on August 17th to 21st will take place in Brussels. Round 8 on September 7th to the 11th will happen in London. And round 9 will occur between September 28th and October 2nd in a location yet to be decided. So that is all the headlines for just now. And before we go on, I do just want to say Heather Anderson is a sitting member of the NEC for the SNP right now. She agreed to appear on the show several days ago to discuss the internal market. And she isn't in a position to speak about NEC decisions. So we're not going to be touching on that particular topic right now. But if I could come to you on this, on a couple of these, what do you make of the chaos right now in the Scottish Tory party? It seems like nobody quite knows why Jackson Carlaw stepped down. Nobody quite knows how Douglas Ross came to be the front runner. And yet things just magically seem to have fallen into place for him. What's your take on how the Tory party is reshaping itself just now?
Reshaping itself or disintegrating. So this was a man who said it would be really easy to defend the union and that he was going to be the next First Minister and actually can't quite survive 5 months in the job. And what we of course noticed is that it was Douglas Ross who kept appearing on the television. So when they were talking about the UK internal market, there was our man Dougie there. So he was being put in position to get the coverage to come up to be the next leader. So it's a done deal. You know, Michelle Ballantyne, who used to be a councillor on Scottish Borders Council before she moved up the road, basically said last night that it was instructed from Westminster. You know, Boris will be behind it. He doesn't like Jackson Carlaw. Jackson Carlaw, like many of the Conservatives in Scotland, don't particularly support a hard Brexit and are finding working with Johnson's government quite difficult. So Boris is putting in his own boy. And
this famously, one of the most famous things he's done, apart from tripping over on the touchline one time, is this comment he made about if he were Prime Minister for the day, the first thing he would do would be to crack down on gypsies and travellers. And then on the same day, you know, today we've heard this Craig Whittaker, Yorkshire MP, blaming Muslims for the coronavirus issue getting out of hand in parts of the north of England. What's wrong with the Tory party when it comes to speaking about race and just difference in general?
Well, I think it's that thing about you need somebody to blame. Trump blamed China for COVID, so they all need somebody to say it's their fault, they've caused the problem, because they don't want to take any responsibility for how they've handled the problem and how they've dealt with it. And what we know is the Tory government's management of this crisis has been extremely poor. There's wide recognition that the Scottish government have done a much better job. They're trusted. We've got higher compliance with the instructions. Johnson never ever wanted to be the person to take responsibility for giving anybody uncomfortable news. He just wanted to be Mr. Popular and Mr. Funny. And suddenly we've got the worst guy in the top job at the most difficult time. So they just have to deflect. They just have to keep saying it's somebody else's fault. It's not our fault. It's not that we haven't done it properly. It's somebody else.
And we mentioned in that story this public health director of public health in Greater Manchester saying that more than half of cases she was dealing with in her area were younger people. And the First Minister said the same thing today with this 13 new cases, which is quite a high number given recent weeks in Scotland. And again, she said that a lot of this was coming from younger people. Do you think there is a problem just now with younger people kind of acting as though the crisis is over and socialising as normal?
Yeah, but I think part of that is the whole message from the UK government was, we were going to be liberated, we were going to be freed, we were going to be allowed to leave our homes. So there's this sort of mental model that this is some sort of storm, and then you can walk out the door and it'll all be fine. So I think people have been led down that route to believing that it's okay now. And, one of the World Health Organization people said a day or so ago, it's not that this is the second wave, this is the first wave breaching the defences. So that whole thing of it's not that we've been through a storm and it's all okay, it's still there. Nothing has changed. The virus hasn't gone away. We're not, we don't have a vaccine. We have to work with it. And I think the Scottish government has been much clearer about saying keep the heat, take precautions, be sensible. If you walk into a crowded place, walk out again. So we're not pretending it's gone.
Yeah.
And I think blaming one group is really unhelpful. This is a biological pandemic. It could have started anywhere. And we're still trying to understand how the virus works. So it's not helpful to say it's young people or it's old people. We're all vulnerable to this. And we don't understand it enough yet to even know who's most vulnerable.
Now, we mentioned this story in Hong Kong, the elections being postponed by a year. And now there's not a great deal of democracy in Hong Kong at the best of times, but given this new security law that's been introduced and the number of politicians or prospective politicians who have now been barred from even standing in the election, how big a concern is that to you? And what do you think the UK government should be saying to China about it?
I think part of my concern is the UK government being used as a proxy for the US government. So there are real issues about a lack of democracy in Hong Kong that we need to protect the democratic rights of the people there. There are real issues, but there's also a global game going on at the moment, which is about China and America. The whole Huawei decision was about us having to comply with what America wanted to do. So I don't think we're an independent actor at the moment. I think we're...
Well, speaking of the US, there have been some rumblings in the US this week from Donald Trump that he might seek to delay the election that's due to happen there in November, or he's talked about how it might not be valid based on the number of postal votes, which, as in a number of other countries, people suspect the postal voting system of possibly being open to corruption. Do you think there's any risk of Donald Trump trying to postpone the election, trying to stay in office, maybe by declaring the election invalid somehow?
Donald Trump will do everything he can to undermine a result which he doesn't want. He basically said he didn't win the popular vote because there was fraud, although there's absolutely no evidence to back that up. But my hope is that he's at the end of his run. The American people have seen through him. He's losing support. So there is a robust democracy in the States. People do have freedom of speech. I don't think they'll let him away with it.
Yeah,
that's my hope.
And finally, we mentioned these Brexit talks now being announced right up until October, which we're told is the kind of hard deadline for when a deal can be done in order to give it time to be approved by all the individual national governments. Do you feel that these 3 more sessions that have been announced, is that enough? Is that going to be enough to get a deal done and signed off and ready for approval by all the relevant parliaments?
Do I think that they want a deal, or do I think they're quite happy with no deal under the cover of COVID? I don't think they're committed to having a good working relationship with the European Union. They haven't taken any of this seriously. They've been incredibly disrespectful. They've been jingoistic. There's not real negotiations going on. Philip Lambert said, turning up and having a cup of tea is not having a negotiation. So the whole thing's been a bit of a game where they basically paint the Europeans as being the bad guys. They're not agreeing to what they want. It's classic imperialism, isn't it? This is what we want. If you don't agree with us, you're in the wrong. We don't negotiate with people who are below us.
Yeah, and so you're not particularly optimistic about a deal being done?
No. We faced no deal as a real possibility twice last year as organic farmers. So I'm very worried about that.
That does bring us pretty directly on to the reason we've got you on to talk today. Now, you made a wee bit of a stir this week on social media speaking about the internal market and some of the risks that it posed. So I guess the first question is, what is this internal market? This is a term that we never heard until very, very recently. So what is the internal market, and why do you think it's something that you need to speak out about?
I think it's cover for a certain UK supremacy over the Scottish Parliament. So basically there's 3 things in here. It's about asserting UK supremacy and then using the very lovely terms mutual recognition, non-discrimination, using these as 2 planks to basically say, if we decide that something is happening, you're accepting it. Right. So it's not that the Scottish government can say we're banning GM and that's going to affect the Westminster government. It's entirely about the UK government asserting their power over the whole of the United Kingdom, because they need to make the whole of the United Kingdom open and available for UK trade deals or any other deals.
Now, the kind of justification that's offered for this is that as we withdraw from EU institutions and EU regulations, there needs to be some sort of framework in place to ensure that a market can operate. So why is there a problem with that for the UK, and why is it not possible for just the existing regulations to be carried over, or for the existing processes to carry on? Why do you think the UK government needs this new legislation?
It's about power. So as you say, there is an internal market. We've been in an internal market for 300 years. There are no barriers to trade between England, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. The only people putting up barriers are the UK government, who are leaving the European Union and erecting the biggest trade barriers possible. They're walking away from the biggest free trade zone in the world. Part of the thing that's going on here that's very irritating in this paper is they spend page after page after page defending the benefits of an internal market, explaining how disruptive it is and costly it is to create trade barriers. And every single case they make, is the case we made for remaining in the European Union. So we were basically saying, yeah, we agree, we want open free trade with an internal market of 500 million people, and now what we've got is an internal market that's much smaller, with 50 million people, and they're going to be in charge. So it's the insult and irony of using all the arguments about the internal market, which supported the European Union, to say we're going to impose control. The difference is that in the European Union, all the rules are made by the member states. Each member state has the same level of power. In this internal market, we don't have any power at all.
Well, that's something I was going to ask about, because we know that the individual nations of the EU, and even in some cases, depending on the internal constitution of those countries, some of the regional areas can have input into these discussions at EU level. To what extent does this internal market white paper enable the Scottish, Welsh and Northern Ireland parliaments and governments to feed into the process?
Well, at the moment, we don't have any details about that. Basically, they're going to create an as yet undefined body, and any future legislation will have to be submitted to this body that's accountable to the UK Parliament, who's got supremacy, and they will ensure that anything that's happening in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland cannot be construed or as being discriminatory or creating an unfair trade barrier. So if we do anything different, it can basically be overruled. If we wanted to protect agricultural wages in Scotland, that would be seen as a barrier to trade, so we would be told not to do it. If we wanted to introduce a deposit return scheme, they could say that's a very costly barrier to international trade want to come to the UK or UK businesses. You're not allowed to do it. You can't do anything that's going to make it disadvantageous for a free market economy to thrive. So basically, we can't undertake any initiatives or protect anything.
And this is this just one of those things where the lack of a formal UK constitution and the kind of elision of UK and English government becomes a real problem, because there are kind of mutual recognition things in the US, for example, where each state recognizes things that other states have done. Is it just is it a situation where, because the UK government and the English government are functionally the same thing, that there isn't one body that everybody, like a sort of federal layer of government? Is that why this is a problem in the UK context?
It's wonderful in this paper because it talks about Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales and the UK. It's this whole thing of the UK is England in charge of everybody else, and they call it the UK because it sounds bigger. So it's partly that thing of, I think the UK or the English government are realising they're not very big at all. They've walked out of a free trade, zone that was the most powerful in the world, and they had a lot of influence in that group, and suddenly they're on their own at the mercy of the US and whoever else might want to do deals with them, and they're realising they're quite far away from all those other trade partners. There's bigger costs in trading with those countries. So I think they've thought, well, we better start throwing our weight about here.
Is that what you think this is? Are you really think this is just about a power grab? You don't think that this is something that needed to be done one way or another?
There are no barriers in the internal market at the moment. So this is a paper solving a problem which doesn't exist. It wasn't a collegiate approach to say, how might we work together to come up with common frameworks? It says very clearly, it's the UK who's going to be in charge, and they're going to use non-discrimination and mutual recognition to ensure that there's a level playing field, and they set the level.
Now, why has this come up now? I mean, we've been
working
on Brexit one way or another since the middle of 2016, and really working in earnest since early 2017 when the Article 50 notification went in. Why is it that we're now less than 6 months away from leaving all EU institutions, all EU regulations, and it's only now after we've actually formally left the EU, that the UK government has got round to tackling this issue.
Well, I don't think you could ever accuse Johnson and the Leave campaign of having a plan that was worked out. It was basically an ideological slogan. They won when they didn't expect to, and they have been stumbling around ever since, thinking, God, like they forgot to take action to ensure that the Scottish Government could make CAP payments. So everything is at the last minute. Here's another problem. This is how we're going to deal with it. And, so this is not a thought through, shared response. This is like, we're at this point, everybody's in recess. We've got a 4-week consultation, sneak this through so when nobody's watching, and then we'll have control. That's my view.
Why do you think it is that this UK government in particular is so belligerent, I guess? Why are they so resistant to even trying to negotiate with the devolved governments?
I don't think they understand devolution. So, all the way through the European, the debates about Brexit, it was getting your head around the fact that the English Westminster government have real difficulty seeing themselves on an equal footing with anyone. They have to be in charge or subservient. So they're happy being subservient to the US, but they're not happy being on an equal footing with the European Union. They have to paint this mythology that they're somehow being bullied, or when actually they were an equal partner there. And I don't think they know how to deal with Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland as equal partners. They don't see us as equal partners.
Do you have any theories on why that is? What's going on in the minds of these leave campaigners that have been described in other places, including by English journalists, as English nationalists? Why they can't see England as separate from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland?
It's not very big, is it? So you need a bit more. You can't lose half your land mass. What was quite interesting is a couple of years, when we were going through the 2014 referendum, Europe didn't understand what was happening in Scotland. But Europe completely understands what's happening now. And Philip Lambert, the leader of the Greens, who would have been a very pro-UK politician, is basically saying this is not about the UK, this is about English nationalism. Mm-hmm. So they now understand that Scotland's in a very difficult position and is a separate nation with a different set of values and beliefs. And there isn't a united kingdom. We keep using this phrase, but it's a disunited kingdom.
And what kind of noises have you heard from other people in the EU institutions? Obviously, you weren't there very long, but you must have made contact with quite a lot of people. What kind of reaction has there been to the way that the UK has handled this entire process?
Well, I'm not in a position to talk about how things are now. All I can say is that when I went to Europe, I went for 3 weeks, although I was only authorised for 4 days. I was overwhelmed by how highly regarded Scotland was and how recognised we were as a leader in climate change, combating climate change, the circular economy, food standards, human rights. So it's that thing of when you go somewhere else, you suddenly see how other people see you. And it makes you cry, really, because you think there's so many people in Scotland don't realise how highly regarded Scotland is and how valued Scotland is to other people. So I think that the real work that the MSPs did, over the years was they created Scotland as a different nation, which is seen and understood now by the European Union. President Macron talked about, hoping that the people of Scotland would speak with their hearts and, keep their European connections.
So, and what do you that point you make? I mean, by all means, we all want to see ourselves as others see us. I mean, that's a very important thing. But what do you think the reaction of the EU is likely to be if Scotland does have another referendum? Do you think there is likely to be vocal support, maybe tacit support, or do you think they're likely to stay well out of it?
I think things will change once the UK ceases to be a member state. So the EU is very clear that it supports and works with the member states. The UK ceases to be a member state on the 1st of January. And we have to position ourselves as an accession state.
Okay. So to return a wee bit to the internal market questions then, what specifically do you think this does to the devolution settlement as a whole? You have mentioned some of the specifics of food standards, for example, but what do you think it does to the way that devolution operates and to the way that perhaps on other issues the Scottish Government and the UK Government might be able to collaborate, or where do you think it's going to lead to more conflict on other issues?
I think, you know, the Scotland Act said that if a power was not reserved, it was devolved, right? So we had control over a huge raft of, you know, health, education, social work, transport. That was our responsibility. And if the UK government was going to intervene in Scottish matters that affected the devolved government, they would have to seek consent. That was a Sewell Convention, as you know. They totally ignored that over the European removal, the withdrawal. And I think the key thing is the people who are in power now in that government don't understand devolution. They don't get it. They weren't part of making it happen. They have no respect for it. They see it as a bit of an irritant. And what they have to do is make sure that the UK, as they call it, is ready with a trade deal. They don't want to be explaining that there are different regulations in Scotland, there are different regulations in Wales. They're basically saying we're in charge, and if you agree something with us, you can do it.
And of course, we spoke a wee bit earlier about the national governments in the EU, but for all the EU is a single market, and you know there was always arguments about its centralising nature. We saw just a few years ago that Wallonia, which is one of the regions of Belgium, was able to hold up the Canadian trade deal because they weren't happy about some of the protections in there. Why do you think, first of all, that nothing like that has ever been available to the devolved governments when we were still inside the EU? And why do you think we can't see something like that adapted into this new UK legislation?
Because you're dealing with a different mental model. So the UK model is the UK government is in charge, and you can have some pocket money to do what you need to do, you know, and we'll give you some control over various things, but we're really the government, and we're in charge. In the European Union, what you have are member states who are working together with equal authority. It's unimaginable. You know, here we just can't get it. But in the European Union, every member state has the same power. They've got one vote. They've got a veto, right? So they have to actually reach agreement. And the wonderful thing about being in the European Parliament is you don't sit in nation states. You sit in political groups. So the SNP are part of the EFA Green Group, which is the fourth largest group in the European Parliament. And we negotiate on policy and principles politically, right? We're not negotiating for one country. We're negotiating for a set of agreed principles for everybody. So the whole sort of joke in the last week or so was you're not allowed to have flags in the European Parliament because you're not there representing a flag. You're there representing an ideology and a set of political beliefs. And of course, Farage kept wanting to bring in the flags. Because that was all he had, really. He didn't have anything to contribute to the discussion. And the way the European Parliament works is they negotiate and debate everything. So for the Green Deal, the Green Group and the EFA Group would sit down, go through all the proposals, come up with their amendments, and then our negotiators would go off into the early hours of the morning to negotiate with the other political groups to get agreement, right? And consensus. It's completely different from I've got 3 more votes than you, so I win.
And
Sorry.
No. Now, there's obviously been significant reaction to this internal market proposal from the SNP and the Scottish Government. Have you been in contact with colleagues, friends in Wales and in Northern Ireland? And how are they reacting to this?
I'm sorry, I'm not. I haven't been. I basically have been in touch with Mike Russell to basically say, is my understanding correct? I'm an organic farmer who's worried about what is going to happen to organics. There's absolutely no proposals to protect organic production post, the 1st of January. Organic certification fees are mentioned in here as a barrier to free trade. So, I think I'm just very concerned about what's going to happen to our exports. Scotland's 1,500% self-sufficient in lamb. We export it to the European Union. We're 1,500% self-sufficient in fish and shellfish. We sell that to the European Union. We're 600% self-sufficient in beef. So this whole issue is about, we're losing agriculture subsidy. We're losing access to the free market we already enjoy. We're losing the protections of the standards on our food. We're losing the geographic indicators for Scotch lamb, Scotch beef, Arbroath smokies, and we're not able to protect our domestic market. So this is the bit of the jigsaw which says you've got no control over your domestic market. If we want to sell you chlorinated chicken, we can, and you won't know it's chlorinated chicken because it won't say it on the label.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about the crisis that the agriculture sector is going to face because of, first of all, barriers to trade, making it more difficult to sell produce, but also lack of access to staff. A lot of people working in the agriculture sector are coming from the European Union under freedom of movement and presumably wouldn't meet the income thresholds that the UK government's talking about.
Many people in Scotland wouldn't meet those income thresholds.
How big a threat is this? Is this something that could actually, kill off farming and fishing in parts of Scotland?
This is massive, right? So about 5 years ago, we were talking about losing our export markets. At that point, there was talk about tariffs on beef and lamb that would have made it too expensive to export. So it's a triple whammy. You lose agricultural subsidy, a huge amount of common agricultural policy subsidy comes to Scotland. You lose the export market. It becomes more difficult to export. We're talking about fresh produce, and you don't protect your domestic market. And, last year when we were nearly at no deal twice, we take our livestock to the abattoir on Sundays. We have a farm shop with a butchery, and every Sunday we go to the abattoir. At the point at which we were facing no deal Brexit, we were working on the basis that the livestock might not get slaughtered, because a large percentage of the people who work on the slaughter line are EU nationals. A large number of the vets in the abattoirs are EU nationals. And at the point of no deal Brexit, all their qualifications cease to be recognised. So they wouldn't be allowed to do their job. We had stockpiling of meat because people were so anxious about what was going to happen at the point where we're coming up to no deal. And then we had a slump because there was too much meat in the market. I don't know. In my farm shop, every week we import fruit and veg from the EU. We put the order in on Wednesday. It comes across the channel. We get it in the UK on Monday. We have it here on Tuesday. When we get to January, a huge percentage of the fresh fruit and veg we use will be coming from the EU. And we have no idea how that is going to work. Is that going to sit in one of Boris Johnson's new lorry parks, rotting quietly? It's really scary. The food supply chain will collapse.
We've heard a number of people talk about this, but it sounds almost apocalyptic, this idea that there just won't be any food on the shelves. Is it that serious?
There will. Yeah, you can have potatoes and turnip and carrots. You're just going to have a problem with tomatoes, courgettes, aubergines, most of the stuff that people are used to eating, So even now, here we are in July, about 50% of the fresh fruit and veg we're selling is imported, right? Scotland, we had an empire because we've got a pretty bad climate here, We're not great at growing fresh fruit and veg. We could do strawberries, but we're not great at a lot of things outside. So trade, we've always been a trading nation. We've always exported and imported. That's a good thing. And what the leaving the EU does is make that much, much, much more difficult for no reason. There's no benefit.
And do you think there is let me just follow that point up then. Who does benefit from this? This is something that's being driven through by a particular political clique that's kind of taken over at number 10. Who is going to benefit from this? If we're going to see shelves that don't in our supermarkets without any food on them, we're going to see industries badly damaged, if not killed off. Who is benefiting from all this?
Well, one of the things that was happening in the European Union was we were about to regulate on banking and greater transparency on, what happened with banks and movements of money. Obviously, the UK will be exempt from that. I think this is ideological. This is the death throes of empire.
So it may be that
there aren't rational reasons for it. There's ideological reasons for it, and people will make money.
But
it just won't be any of the normal people.
I mean, it seems almost inconceivable that people who are so vocally proud of their country would do something that was going to harm so many people within it. It's a very difficult thing to get your head around, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think in our referendum there was all this rational argument and debate, and what about the economy, what about the currency, what about would we be better off? That didn't happen in the Brexit negotiation. There was no sort of sensible discussion about what the impacts would be. It was an ideological rush about English nationalism. That's what I think it was about. And the Europeans, Philip Lambert said this is about English nationalism.
Yeah, and there's this question now: if the SNP does well at the election next year, there is talk about a referendum on independence relatively soon after that. But that is going to be a minimum of 6 to 8 months after we have left all the EU institutions. This internal market legislation will have come into force. How much damage do you think can be done to Scotland, Scotland's agriculture, Scotland's other exporting industries, Scotland's governance, systems of governance? How much damage can be done, do you think, in that time?
I think that there are countries join the European Union as accession states who've got much harder hurdles to climb than us. At the moment, we comply with all the standards. We share a lot of the legal frameworks around human rights and the policies. So we're not coming from a long way back. We are actually in there at the moment. So that works in our advantage. I'm not saying we'll be fast-tracked, but we'll have less things to prove and less things to do than other countries who wish to join the European Union. What we do know is the European Union looks after the member states. They were very generous to Ireland. We keep looking at Ireland and thinking, God, that could be us, another wee country that is being supported well. It will be cold. It will feel very cold when we're out of the European Union, but we just have to keep our eye on the fact that we're not a little adjunct of a failing UK. We've always been a European nation. One of the things that really upset me, well, there's lots of things that upset me in this UKIM paper, but they talked about how the Act of Union, which they referred to, I think, 15 times, was basically so good for us, and it helped Crieff and Falkirk do really well in the 18th century, and it helped us improve our trading relationship with the Baltic nations. Scotland was trading with the Baltic nations in the 13th century, right? We've always traded. So we just need to take ourselves seriously, see how well we could do as an independent European country, and just keep our eye on that prize. That'll get us through the winter.
Yeah. Now, if people want to kind of make a noise about this internal market proposal, if they want to protest against it or fight back against it, what can our viewers do if they want to get involved in this? We're 2 weeks into the consultation period, which is 4 weeks. There are 4 questions, which are basically, would you rather die in a dungeon or fall off a cliff? That's the kind of questions we get asked. So do you want this body who's accountable to the UK government to be in charge, or this body that's accountable to the UK government to be in charge? So they're pretty closed questions. One of the questions says, how can we make sure that non-discrimination is more effective? So it's encouraging businesses to identify things that they could see as trade barriers. So you could respond to the 4 questions by basically saying we don't agree. But I think the main thing is to realise where we are in this failing relationship with the UK government, and how there is no future there. There's no future for Scotland in the UK. We need to be an independent nation in the world as part of the European Union, and you couldn't have more evidence about how bad things are going to get when looking at bits of paper like this. This is the future, and it's not ours. We have a different future. So just keep focusing on independence and the kind of country we want to be. Are you worried at all that might be portrayed as kind of fatalistic, to say, well, there's no way we can work with the UK, and then the UK can say, well, they don't want to work with us, so we've had to do things without talking to them? Is that a risk, or do you think that's something that's going to happen anyway?
I'm not being fatalistic. I think we've had a very long period of time of being ignored, turning up to meetings where we haven't been supplied with the papers until the press release comes out. Our wishes have not been taken seriously. I'm not being fatalistic. I'm just saying it's a waste of time. They're not going to suddenly say, oh gosh, were we disadvantaging Scotland? Let's change the rules. They know what they want to do, and we need to just focus on getting our own future.
Mm-hmm. So
the election in May is about independence.
Just before we go then, how confident are you that Scotland can achieve its independence sometime soon?
100%.
Well,
I think the thing that, there's always that great phrase from John Smith, we haven't talked about the fact that the silent sleepers in this discussion are the Labour Party. And I have been very aware that we're hearing nothing from the Labour Party. The Labour, John Smith, Donald Dewar delivered devolution in Scotland. It wasn't an SNP policy. It was a Labour government that delivered it with leading Labour Party members. And at this moment, the Labour Party have to waken up and decide whether they want to be a silent branch office, or whether they actually want to set up an independent Scottish Labour Party and fight for devolution. So I think we're all moving. John Smith talked about the settled will. I think the settled will is now in favour. It's moving very much in favour of independence. So it's not a dramatic, exciting goal. It's what people understand as being the best thing. And that's how the Scots vote, really. They basically go along saying, what's going to put us in the best position? And I think most people in Scotland have moved towards independence.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to wrap up there, but the Labour Party position is quite confused, isn't it? Because Welsh Labour in government, and they've spoken out quite strongly against this. Scottish Labour have been a lot more muted, and UK Labour is still kind of struggling to find a policy on Brexit, aren't they?
It's a disgrace. You know, the statue outside your window, Donald Dewar would be turning in his grave. You know, Donald Dewar fought for devolution. He was pleased that we had a devolved parliament. It was his life's work. John Smith's, it was his life's work. I can't believe they have nothing to say. It's shocking.
Yeah. Well, it has been a very interesting conversation, Heather. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And thank you at home for joining us as well. The whole reason we make these shows is to help bring the news to you in an interesting way and to discuss some of these issues in a bit of depth where you might not get that on other channels. We can only do this, though, with your support. So if you are able to support us financially, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up there as a supporter, and your £5 a month makes a big, big difference in helping us pay the bills and then develop more and better shows for you. If you're not able to support us financially, then we would we do understand. We know times are tough for a lot of people just now. But you can still help us out in a big way by following us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, following us on Facebook, and also by if you're on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel there, like our videos there, get notifications there as well. Click the wee bell icon and get notifications too, so that you'll always be aware what's happening on Broadcasting Scotland. And then share the shows around. That's the big thing. Let people know why you watch Broadcasting Scotland and encourage them to give us a try as well. And finally, we have talked about this a bit recently, but we are looking towards that election next year, and to cover that properly, Broadcasting Scotland is going to need a lot of bodies. We want people in every count if we can get them, if we can get enough people organised to get out there. So if you're interested in any way in getting involved in that or any other projects we have going on here at Broadcasting Scotland, do please get in touch with us. We would love to have you. We want to get people as trained up, as skilled up as possible so that we really can deliver the kind of election coverage that Scotland deserves for what promises to be, as Heather was saying, a really momentous democratic moment for Scotland. So that is all we have time for this evening. So once again, thank you very much to Heather Anderson for joining us. I will be back on Sunday with the Full Scottish, and then Gordon will be back on Monday with Scotland at 7. But until then, thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.